Hello everyone, this is Hakaymgaming and welcome back to some more World of Warships, and today I'm taking a look at the new submarine mode that they released not too long ago. Was finally able to actually get on tonight, play some World of Warships. It is Friday, so that means I get to enjoy the weekend. Didn't play any this week, really just wanted to focus on my job. Because it was my first time teaching, so that's kind of what I did. So yes, I'm actually taking a look at the submarine, not from the submarine perspective, mind you. I'm actually taking a look at it from the Mutsu. So yeah, let's talk about this mode. Let's talk about submarines. I know there's been a lot of videos, on it. Flamu is probably one of the big names, but all the other YouTubers have talked about it, and it's still not perfect. Honestly, I really don't think submarines should ever be added. To be perfectly frank, so as you can see on the team, it's actually very light on the submarines. There's actually just one submarine per team. Quite a few destroyers. There's 4 destroyers and a few battleships, and as you can probably see, there are in fact actually bots on the teams. So that does mean that the gameplay can't be 100% accurate because bots are really dumb. They sail in a straight line to their death by either ramming or just opening up and being killed by the enemy team. So bots aren't really dependable, and we do have a few bots on each team. There are 5 bots, so that does make up almost a majority of it all, or a majority, a half of the team is bots. So I mean, that's something to at least kind of keep in mind of this. But the fact, probably my biggest issue with submarines, is what would happen if, say for example, your destroyers or your light cruisers, which are the only ones in the game that have depth charges and are actually capable of dealing damage besides other submarines, what would happen if, you know, those very specific ships that have the only consumable designed specifically to take out submarines while they are essentially invulnerable below the water, because the only time you can actually hit and damage a submarine is when it's at the surface, and it's not very reliable because you really can't see what the submarine is doing. You're looking at the mini-map trying to gauge what the angle and the direction the submarine's going in. But to be perfectly honest, the submarine doesn't need to be at the surface for very long. They're generally going to be under the water most times, because they're extremely stealthy. They only really need to dive if there is a ship almost on them. So that is kind of a big issue right there, is the fact that they can essentially hide for the majority of the battle. And this kind of what happens in this battle. This battle drags out because there is one submarine that is still alive. A little bit of spoilers there. But I guess the other main complaint about submarines is if you're in a battleship, for example. Battleship's a fantastic example. You're pretty much screwed, to be perfectly honest. Because if, say for example, I was dealing with a destroyer, I can handle a destroyer. A destroyer I can shoot at, especially if it gets dumb, I guess, or really bravado, huge bravado just to charge. I could actually shoot and damage it. May not kill it, I might die in the outcome, but I actually have the possibility of taking out a threat that's coming towards me. So there's that. Another big thing is destroyer torpedoes go in a straight line. So a battleship, if played correctly, has a good chance of at least dodging those torpedoes. Because if you use your WASD hacks, you can definitely have a good chance at dodging those torpedoes. Now, here's the obviously different thing about submarines, and probably a lot of you are aware that submarines have a homing torpedoes. So the submarines do have the ability to ping a ship. There are 2 ping points on a ship, the stern and the bow, and if both are, or at least one is pinged, the torpedoes become homing torpedoes, and if both are pinged, they are both homing and able to completely ignore citadel armor, which means if, say, for a battleship here, those torpedoes hit, they actually cause full citadel damage instead of being negated by your torpedo bulkheads. So they can deal a lot of damage very quickly, so they're quite devastating and damn near impossible to actually dodge. So it's terrible for a battleship. Really terrible for a battleship, because you can't really do much against them unless they decide to come to the surface and you're able to snap off a shot. But something else to keep in mind, if you don't have high explosive loaded and you have armor piercing, you're not gonna do any damage. The only way you can do damage against a against a submarine is if you have high explosive and relying on the splash damage. So that is a huge issue right there, because a battleship, well, obviously can't reload its guns very fast. You'd have to change ammo type, especially if you're shooting at armored ships such as battleships or cruisers. So changing the ammo type does take a little bit of time. I know people like, oh, you should always be mindful of what ammo type you're using. But honestly, most times AP is usually the best choice. Yes, there are circumstances where HE you want to switch. But yeah, that's besides the point. That's not really why I'm here. So, biggest issue is if you lose your destroyers and your light cruisers on your team, there's still a submarine left. There's not much you can do against that submarine. Your best hope is to either try to cap, which is going to be difficult if the submarine decides to be smart enough and actually pursue you into said cap, or get extremely lucky and hopefully the submarine is dumb enough to actually come to the surface where you can actually land a shot. And that's not even a guarantee you're going to be able to take it out by it, like from full health. So, I mean, that right there is kind of a big issue. So, kind of sucks when you're a battleship, and as the game is going, it's fairly even, to be perfectly honest. But I will have to say, being a destroyer against a submarine, especially if you have a submarine isolated by itself, the submarine's screwed. Submarine is screwed either way, because I did play a battle before this one, played the T621. Had a submarine all by itself, and I quite literally sat on top of it and just dropped depth charges, and I think it took about 4 depth charge shots to kill it. So submarines are very fragile if they're caught off by themselves against a destroyer or a light cruiser and the submarine doesn't get the kill. So yes, I understand that they do have a weakness, destroyers, but I mean, the biggest issue is the benefit of a destroyer, with a few exception of certain nations, is their stealth. And submarines can essentially outspot a destroyer with relative ease. And even though the destroyer can do significant damage against submarines, the destroyer is still spotted. And if that destroyer is spotted and there are friendlies around, which more than likely there is, that destroyer is going to be shot at and take either a very substantial amount of damage or is destroyed outright. So kind of a big issue for a destroyer to deal with. I am going to also point out in this battle, taking actually a focus on this battle. I've been kind of ignoring it, just talking about submarines, giving kind of my 2 cents on it. Our friendly submarine here and our Graspe. I mean, I understand for the Graspe. Right now, he's dealing with the submarine. He's being torqued at, but there's nothing he can do against. Because, as you just probably have noticed, we've lost the last of our destroyers. And we still have a submarine. Now, there is still the possibility that the submarine can actually hit the enemy submarine. It's possible, it's doable. And the reason I know this is what you will be seeing in just a little bit. But honestly, the Graspe can't do anything. I can't do anything. The CV can't do anything unless it's at surface, and it can only do anything if it has its rocket planes. So kind of a big issue for us right now is we can't really do anything against it. Actually, I'm trying to think if the galley there can actually do anything. I actually don't know. I'm actually kind of curious. I probably should have looked at it, but right here, watch this. So it's essentially submarine versus submarine. Both are U-69, the German submarines. They're both full health. I did not realize this while I was playing the battle. I was currently busy dodging torque planes incoming, and unfortunately I'm in a Mutsu, and the Mutsu's AA is kind of trash. But did a pretty good job dodging torque planes. But look at this. So the enemy submarine actually manages to land a hit with its torpedoes. Does nearly 7/8 of the enemy or the friendly submarine's health. But I don't really know what our submarine's doing because he's still flooding, still on fire. Should have a repair party because he hasn't been hit. He has managed to kill, so I mean that at least is something good. But he is still flooding and is essentially losing this battle, which honestly is not good for us because he was the only thing that could have dealt with that submarine. But he's already taken that torpedo hit. He is barely alive. All that has to happen is that the enemy submarine gets off more torpedoes, and that's essentially what happens, which is very, very aggravating, as you probably guess. Even rewatching it was just aggravating to see it. So, yeah, this is probably the biggest issue, because submarines, like I said, are very stealthy. They can deal substantial amount of damage, and this is a tier 6 battle, mind you. So just think if there was like a tier 10 submarine, dealing with that would be a nightmare, just an absolute nightmare to deal with. So that is probably my biggest complaint, is just how invulnerable they are, because right now we're essentially tied at this moment. We're gonna get this kill off on this galley, which is definitely gonna be beneficial for us. But there's nothing that we can really do against the enemy submarine. The only thing we could really focus on is just capping. But honestly, that submarine, if he had a little bit more time, he probably could have pulled this battle back from the outcome. So, a little bit of spoiler there, I know, but oh, look at that! That was crap. Got the fire taken care of, and then of course the last shell from that galley manages to light my stern on fire. So of course RNG actually hasn't been very favorable for me in this battle. Been shooting at quite a few broadside targets, been getting a lot of overpens and just normal penetrations. So RNG just hasn't been very, very kind for me. So yeah, submarines. I mean, honestly, when they were first introduced, I mean, it was interesting. It's been kind of a thing that has been asked about and talked about because obviously submarines were a part of World War II warfare. But going back to, you know, the early days of World of Warships, wargaming, I mean, no one can really trust anything wargaming says because they pretty much speak out of one mouth and a few moments later they'll speak out of another. Meaning that they don't always keep with the promises or what they say, so not really surprised that they brought out submarines. Essentially, it's just a way that they can try to bring new interest into the game. To be perfectly honest, that's essentially what this is. Because honestly, I don't see anything good coming out of the current setup with submarines. Now, could they tweak it? Could they make it a little bit different? Because essentially 3 classes of ships can't really deal with a submarine. That's carriers, battleships, and heavy cruisers, leaving only destroyers and light cruisers to deal with them. Because originally, obviously, the whole thought process behind World of Warships is a rock, paper, scissors aspect. Battleships take care of cruisers, cruisers take care of destroyers, destroyers take care of battleships. That's the original kind of thought process behind there. Of course, there was carriers back in the day, but they weren't overly popular. So that's, I mean, something kind of keep in mind of. Carriers upset the balance because they completely change how spotting is done. They're able to deal damage safely. Lots of floodings, and then you have submarines which are essentially immune against 3 classes of ships. Absolutely immune. Of course, you can't have those stupid submarine players that are really dumb and come up to the surface. You can get lucky. Yeah. I mean, there's always that aspect, but essentially there's not much you can really do. As you're kind of seeing right now, I have the submarine chasing me. He's in the cap, which, I mean, I would have to say that's one thing I don't agree with right here, is that the submarine is actually able to completely negate the capture process of the enemy cap, even while he is more than likely underwater. He might be above water, but I know he is right behind me. He actually might be above water, so don't quote me on that. I'm gonna actually have to research to see whether or not the submarine has to be on top of the water. I'm now that I'm thinking about it, I think it is, because you can't cap on conquest. Conquest? That is not the word. Domination. You can't cap while dealing while in a submarine. But here, as you can see, the U-69 has popped up, disappeared. He is very close to me. There he goes, 2.5 kilometers away. Popped up, only 10 meters down, and honestly, just watch how quickly, bam, 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 completely destroyed by the enemy submarines. Enemy submarine's gonna get away, but fortunately, we're ahead in points, and the clock is about to tick out. But yeah, that's kind of my thought process on submarines. At the current state, I still think they're a bad idea. I think they're just a way to try to bring in more interest to World of Warships. I mean, I'm probably going to play them. I mean, it's a cool idea, don't get me wrong, but that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys have a great and fantastic day. Zaijian.